Yeah, no, I was gonna go into Ray-Bans and get a new pair of glasses at Ray-Bans, but because these were flickering, so I just took the batteries out. They stopped. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of VR Download, a weekly show broadcast live from the Upload Virtual Studios, where we bring you news, reviews, comments, and interviews. Today's show, Monday's show at noon Pacific, I promise, is all about industry news, technology, stuff like that. If you're into games, Thursday is the show that you want to watch. Thursday is the game show. Hi, I'm your host, Kyle, with my glasses not flickering today. I promise you. They're not going to flicker. But let's see who we have over here to my left today.
Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton here, coming in from the center of the United States with my Quest standalone hand tracking, driving my expressions today. So thank you for joining us. We'll do the little hand tracking demo. Yeah.
I'm David Heaney from Northern Ireland, and I'm using controllers today. I don't know why. I just decided I'll use controllers today.
Hey, why not? You're given the option to do so. There's no reason why you wouldn't want to. Tracking is wonderful with the hands, or you can use the controllers. Good stuff. Wow. So, this week we have some fun stuff to talk about, some news stuff, a couple updates, and, something that we don't do a lot is talk about the PSVR and the upcoming potential PSVR2. So we're going to talk about that. So if you're a Sony PlayStation person, stay tuned. We've got news for you. But let's start today's news with some Meta Quest 2 news. So the Quest 2 now shows pets, people, and Android phone notifications. If you have an Android phone, Ian, are you working with an Android phone?
No, I've been an iPhone for ever. I've owned a couple Android phones over the year, but yeah, I'm usually iPhone. And to be honest, like this feature launched on iPhone first, but I still haven't gotten it up and running on iPhone. So I haven't seen what this feature looks like, but it should fulfill that promise going back to the original HTC Vive from 2016 of showing you some notifications in VR so you don't have to constantly look out from under your headset to see what's happening on your phone.
Yeah, because I have that problem all the time where I'm in VR and I hear, ding or bloop, bloop or something. And I'm like, oh no, what is that? If only that would pop up right in front of me while I'm trying to shoot zombies. That would be fantastic. Or getting into my groove of Beat Saber and then all of a sudden, or I'm trying to pull that big fin and then mom is trying to get a hold of me for some unknown stupid reason. I mean, so you've never gotten your notifications to show up, Ian, yet?
No, yeah, I've gone through the bottom of the headset for years now. I've never really successfully. I've turned it on several times, and I can't figure out what combination of like log out, log back in I need to be doing to make that feature work.
Heaney, what about you?
Yeah, I use Android. I use Google Pixel phones. I got the new update, but I haven't actually noticed an option to turn on notifications. It could be one of those things where Meta/Facebook sometimes rolls out an update where some of the features are then themselves rolled out independently from the version. So that can be quite confusing as to what features are actually in what version. But whatever way it is, I don't actually have that feature yet, no.
Interesting. I'm curious, since we are live in the studio, we have our lovely YouTube chat group and a lot of regulars here, a lot of new folks. Hi, how you doing? I'm curious if others are having success with the notifications, not just success of it actually working, but is it actually helpful? Because, the whole idea of immersion is I'm here, not everywhere else. Do I actually want these notifications? Now, obviously, you want notifications if, somebody's trying to break into your house, or, you have an Amazon package at the front door or something like that, or, kid needs to be picked up from school because they, threw up during gym class. I don't know. Ian, I mean, when you're in VR, do you want to be in VR, or do you want to have the real world to be able to interrupt you?
It's a fair question. I think it's a setting, just like Do Not Disturb on my phone itself, that I'm going to want to be able to have my computing devices around me be smart enough to know whether I want to be notified, or whether that sort of notification rises to the importance of like letting me know in VR that I need something. But it should be like another kind of Do Not Disturb. It's like, I don't know, going to the movies and making sure that it doesn't really interrupt you.
Yeah, I think I'd like it to work like on Pixel, where you can set certain conversations as coming through as a notification in VR, but not others. I don't personally really like the way it's done now, where it's done through your phone, because I think you would want to have very different settings for your phone than your headset. And Messenger already is on Quest, so I don't understand why Meta couldn't just put WhatsApp and Instagram messages on and allow you to select inside the headset which conversations you do want to see in VR, such as from family members or close friends, and which you don't, generic messages that you can just pick up on your phone after you're done playing whatever game you're playing.
So I could pick like my top 5 or my circle of 8 or whatever all of that nonsense used to be. Then they're allowed in, but nobody else. Yeah. I don't know. The whole idea of the notifications is one thing, but pets and people, that's a totally different thing. I mean, I need to know if my gerbils get out of the cage and scurry across my carpet. Is this new? This isn't.
It's funny. Like, there is a limit on this being a large animal. This feature does require it to be a certain size animal. So I don't think your small pets, they might still get squashed. I like the 2 headlines out there. I think it was The Verge and Gizmodo went with these dual headlines of like, new Oculus update will help you not punch your children, and new Oculus update will help you not punch your pets. And like, is that what we're in for with VR over the next 5 to 10 years? Is just all the dystopian ways VR is going to destroy our world. Like, oh, here's a new feature to make VR not destroy our world just a little bit less.
Yeah, but if it's not going to stop me from stepping on my gerbils, but it stops me from duking it out with Marmaduke, I mean, that's a little bit different. I think hitting the children, and we've all seen the videos of. Yeah, well, this is if the fish get out of the.
Can one of you cast the right image? I was hoping one of you would do it.
Let me find it. Let me see.
Are we back? Oh, okay. All right. See, this is what happens. I think Heaney must have punched his computer.
Can you cast the right image? Sure, I can stop the stream.
Yeah, let me just cast the right image and yeah.
Well, I got the right image. This is their visualization for showing you what the pass-through feature looks like. It's a spooky ghost image. I think folding in with that first conversation about the phone notifications, I had this conversation with Michael Abrash and other journos like a year ago, and they were talking about their research into enhanced hearing over at Meta. Or they were Facebook at the time, but they called it enhanced hearing, and they had this concept of you being out at a restaurant and wearing kind of earbuds in your ear, and the earbuds automatically cancel out every conversation in the restaurant except for the conversation of the person sitting right across from you. And I put this question to the researchers on that call saying, well, wait, if you can enhance and drown out everyone, like mute everyone else and enhance the person right across from you, could you do the reverse and mute all of your virtual content in a virtual world just to hear audibly a person who has walked into your space a little more clear if they're addressing you? So let's say I'm in VR and walked into my room, Kyle, and you want to talk to me. It would be the same technology that they're using to apply to muting all the people you aren't actually paying attention to could actually be used to make you hear someone more clearly in a VR headset that has come into your room, and they could mute the virtual world so you could hear the person in your physical room more clearly. When I asked them that question of whether they were thinking about that idea, they hadn't thought of it yet. The stuff that they're doing with enhanced hearing, like that is the very cutting edge of the concepts that Facebook is dealing with and the technologies that they're going to roll out.
So you said, can I enhance being able to hear somebody to a bunch of Facebook execs, and they just looked at you and just went, what? Okay. I mean,
well, so they were like, no, they thought about enhancing hearing out in the real world, out in like public spaces. And I'm suggesting, well, wait, actually, what is the most useful feature is an audio version of this technology where I'm, Beat Sabering, and the moment that someone walks into the room, the Beat Saber experience should dynamically mute itself a little bit so that the person walking in the room can speak to me and I can actually hear them. And they hadn't actually considered that use case, but maybe they'll have it here in the next little while, because it would be incredibly useful to be able to have the virtual world mute itself a little bit and be able to hear someone.
Have either of you tried this yet? The Space Sense?
I have not. Yeah, I haven't been able to get it running.
So I tried it, and I actually got to say I was very surprised. It is not what it's advertised as, and it doesn't work like you would think it does at all. How you would think this works is, as it says, a child or pet or moving object comes into your space, and you can see a shadowy outline of them. It's actually much, much more than that. And it's almost a Guardian 2.0 in a way, although maybe a very early alpha version of a Guardian 2.0. You actually see not just moving objects, but physical static objects. You can see your furniture. You can see the outlines of any kind of edge in your room. And you look around, and it's actually very odd, because as you go to the edge and you see your traditional Guardian that you drew yourself, it kind of seems redundant, because you can now just see the furniture, or at least an outline of it, as you get near to it. And right now, I actually disabled it because it's far too sensitive, in my opinion. You can see far too much of your real world furniture and geometry and the shape of your walls and everything. But if they could allow you to maybe turn down the sensitivity or tweak it in some way, this, in my opinion, could replace the current Guardian system we have today. But it was so strange to me to turn it on and think, did I turn on the wrong feature? This is not just moving objects at all. It's non-moving objects as well. You can kind of see it in the edge on that screenshot where it shows the little outline of the furniture. That's what you'll see all around your room for everything in your room.
Wow. I haven't played with it yet. Typically when I'm doing VR, I'm trying to stay out of the way of a lot of physical objects and things walking in, but that's the whole point of this feature, right? Is to prevent things from meandering in, and then you're sitting there playing Beat Saber, and all of a sudden you step down and you squish a little rodent or something. This obviously the kid thing, that's more likely to occur, I think, is somebody walks in and is completely oblivious to the fact that you have something on your head and you're in a virtual world. And they come up and they're like, Daddy, can I, make pizza or whatever? It's a good idea, but the execution of it is going to have to be better.
I was just going to say, Anakazi in the comments asking, is it like the Vive 1.0 pass-through? And I think what you're referring to there is a feature you can set on the index as well, where it's kind of like an edge recognition thing, and it's just like in Photoshop or whatever, where you try to look at edges. What I said is, no, it definitely isn't 2D, because if I pointed it at, for example, a piece of furniture that had stripes on it, it's not showing the stripes, it's only showing the lines that are actually three-dimensional, so the shape of the couch itself. So it is doing some kind of depth understanding there and some kind of AI, though like I said, it doesn't seem to be very sophisticated, because it currently shows far too much that compared to what you'd want to see. It's downright distracting to the point where you would turn it off because you just want to see more of the VR world.
The more that you let the headset control what it sees in terms of your play area, you start to get to a point where certain things don't show up well. So I remember back in the HoloLens 1 days when I was in, Microsoft's Building 95, and they're showing us all these like pre-staged areas and stuff. You can't have a black leather couch. The HoloLens 1 doesn't see black leather. I don't know what the science behind that is, but it absorbs all light. It doesn't reflect anything back, something like that. Don't quote me on the science, but I wonder if there are certain materials, certain reflectivity or colors or shapes that this technology can't see. Mirrors. And then, of course, this brings, mirrors, right? But this brings Ian in, put your tinfoil hat on. What can I intentionally wear that all of this technology can't see me?
It's funny. I was thinking about Blade Runner recently, and there's that famous scene where Harrison Ford basically does the enhance with voice recognition to zero in on an image. And it always, in retrospect, like, he zero in on the reflection of a mirror to find a detail like in a bathtub that was not visible in one corner of this photograph. Like, I do think about the sort of the reason I bring up the mirror thing is interesting because I remember there being research papers showing how, like, the moment that they can identify and mask the mirror out of the room and realize that they should be ignoring all the geometry that they see reflected through the mirror, then they can actually turn around and start using the mirror as a really interesting tool for various things in your virtual world. Like, if they can be really reliable about knowing that the mirror is there and potentially like turn this weakest part of the whole thing, that the mirror could like mess with your actual positional tracking, like maybe actually turning into a strength.
Through the looking glass. That's cool, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that paper was on their reconstruction tech where they're trying to reconstruct the room. I think they showed a little bit of that at the Facebook Connect 2021 last week, where they were able to mask out the mirror. Yeah, it's an interesting idea to think how that could work with tracking tech as well. I noticed that with this, one thing it definitely did not detect is a window. So you would walk straight into a window if you weren't using your traditional Guardian. But like I said before, if this had a sensitivity setting, I would choose this over the current Guardian if that was an option, which it currently isn't.
Of course, turn it down denotes the ability to turn it way up too, to the point where it sees every little thing. That'd be curious.
James is getting to my point here about there seems to be a whole smart mirror market for fitness. That's what I'm playing at with, like, if the system can reliably know what a mirror is and what it is, like actually being able to look into your rec room, dorm room mirror is a fundamental part of the beginning of the rec room experience. Like, actually being able to use mirrors in virtual reality to look at your avatar is like a very useful feature.
Oh no, you're giving Meta the idea to use Portal to be able to look into.
It's 100% going to happen. It has to happen.
Man, so you're just going to be able to turn Portal on and be able to see what's happening in Horizon Worlds and go, oh, I want to go to that thing. And then you put your headset on and in you go.
Well, I think the portals can act as a mirror or as that thing, like one of either thing. I think that's where we're going.
For sure, yeah. But I think Boz, last time he was asked, sort of hinted at the fact that there's not enough people that simultaneously own a Quest and a Portal. But in future, that'll start to change, and that it'll start to make more sense for them to integrate those products. Just to come back, Kyle, to Space Sense here, you were saying you could turn it way up in sensitivity. Yeah, you could, but the problem there, and this has been my main problem with Guardian and Chaperone and all these systems, is that they're always drawn in front of the app. Even on the Rift, where the apps send the depth buffer to the system, Guardian will always be drawn in front. So even if you have a piece of furniture that's over there, you will see it in front of your hand, which is right in front of you. So I'd love to see a system like this incorporate the depth buffer that we'll talk about in a second is now going to be used for application SpaceWarp, so that you don't have this kind of situation where it really does strain your eyes. It really actually hurts your eyes when you're looking at a virtual object that should be closer, but something that should be further away is rendered in front of it. Or at least it really hurts my eyes.
So you want occlusion of the virtual version of the real world in your... Oh man, my head hurts.
It really does hurt
Ow!
to even think about this sort of thing. But
Yeah.
that is what I think would be a lot more visually comfortable, because otherwise, you put your hand in front of your couch and you see your couch in front of your hand, and the eye strain is horrible for me
I
personally.
hate when that happens. Yeah. Well, it's I keep thinking about this whole portal concept. And you walk into Horizon Worlds, a virtual world, you're looking around, there's just people, just staring out of their portal, real video. You just sit and, I just picture one person looking around. It's like that scene when Neo visits the architect. Oh man. You think somewhere in the meta, like, reality world, there's a room like that where they can look in and see
Yeah,
everybody.
that's one of the questions, if we ever, spoiler alert, if we're ever able to actually rope Mark Zuckerberg or Andrew Bosworth into the studio, one of my questions is, do you have a God mode for your virtual worlds, which is literally described in Ready Player One by the co-founder of the Oasis, like God that allows them to hide inside any virtual room they want. I'm curious if there's going to be that capability built in, and I'd like to get them on the record about whether that's going to exist or not.
Yeah, I don't think they're ever going to answer that question.
I still need it on the record.
I think they have revealed, haven't they, or hinted at the idea that moderators can listen into a conversation if someone reports it, and you won't know the moderator is there. But I don't know whether an executive could just become a moderator at will. It's an interesting thought of potential abuse of power.
Well, so to be clear, the way it does function is they have a rolling buffer of recorded content, of recorded interaction that maybe lasts 10 to 15 seconds. I don't actually know how long it lasts, but it's always recording when you're in a Horizon World space. And anytime you can hit basically submit that recording to authority and have them act on it. But I don't think that's monitoring in real time.
No, they did also talk about the idea that moderators can actually come in and invisibly, if someone reports it and then at the spot, the moderator can come in and in real time be there. It was one of the big concerns I saw raised when Horizon was announced and the details given out. And there's like a safety video where they show it on YouTube. They have like a 1 minute explanation of their safety features. And it was, I don't know if they've dropped that since, but certainly when Horizon was announced, that was an idea on the table. And one of the reasons that some people would find it very uncomfortable to have a private conversation in Horizon Worlds.
So that lends itself to the concept of metaverse virtual angels or demons, depending on which shoulder you're
exactly like
over.
The Upload TV show. Yeah, with no less the world that the Upload TV show is dealing with is called Horizon. Very, very creepy stuff.
No way. It's almost like that was all planned out somehow. I don't know. So do you think other companies will include something like this in future product? I can imagine, here, kid, swallow this, so that way you have an AirTag in your system, so I can tell you where you are for the Apple headset, or you put a dog tag for the dog, and it's got a little just AirTag. I could see that happening.
Yeah, I've been testing out the capabilities of sort of Apple's Find My ecosystem of products fairly recently to see kind of the different arrangements they have. And there's like different ways to find your devices. Like if you lose your AirPods, you can hit a button to make the AirPods make a loud sound. But that's not the same as some of the more advanced functionality with the Find My features, where you can basically use your phone like a finder, like a metal detector almost, where it's going to point you in the direction of your object, and then you're going to walk to it and you're going to see this number countdown as you get warmer and warmer, closer and closer to your physical object. But that sort of quality tracking is only on some of Apple's devices. They've got a long way to go before they can do that for like any object in your home and pull a recall of like, where did you last drop that object? I've said this before on our show, where this feature that Heaney is describing as it could be like a Guardian 2.0, I think it would be perfectly conceivable for Apple or other companies to draw the line at this feature as the line where we're not going to release a headset without this functionality built into the device, because they could look at this feature and say it's just too fundamentally necessary to know what else is happening in your room, that they just won't make a headset before this feature is up and running. So I would not be surprised to see every other company have this feature by default in every headset going forward.
Yeah, because there's a lot of potential for disaster. I mean, I can't believe I have to say this, but someday there will be a news story where somebody is out playing in VR in their yard and they get, somebody on I'll make it simple, somebody on a motor scooter like runs into them, and they get injured. It's going to happen. Somebody who goes running full blast face first into a brick wall. I mean, we've seen what happens with Richie's plank, because people don't understand, how gravity works and video games and all of that. But I wonder if this is going to be, to your point, Ian, if this is going to be a mandatory feature going forward. Maybe not necessarily Guardian 2.0, Guardian 3.0, Guardian Angel.
Yeah, it's really interesting. He and I have had a lot of debates or discussion about this over time of like the last year and a half, and Heaney has brought up the discussion around the Oculus Go unlocked OS. And there was this strategy with Facebook requiring Facebook accounts that kind of put Facebook on the side of these headsets need to be safe, and we're more or less like not going to allow you to use these devices in unsafe conditions. Like that's kind of like the first couple of years of Quest were kind of guardrailed that way. Like you couldn't do Space Pirate Trainer type experiences.
Seated experience, they required a seated experience.
Yeah, Rift.
And now it's like, go run around all you want, 10 meters by 10 meters.
Yeah, so the thing I guess I'm going to throw there is like there is a pathway there to a device that you're able actually to get some basic functionality out of this like standalone computer without hooking it up to any account system whatsoever. And then once you maybe hook it up to an account system, you get this type of functionality. You get the insight into your surroundings and really robust positional tracking. But I think there's a route to having standalone VR headsets that don't have this feature and don't have any account system logged in, and you really are taking your life into your own hands every time you put that device on. But if you want an open computing platform, that's starting to be the line where you have to draw the functionality. I want to be able to have a VR headset that I can use without having this feature necessarily turned on.
It's difficult to see how you would have no account system. How would people get content to access a store? You would have to have some sort of account system, unless it was purely web based. But even Chromebooks, you have to have an account to sign in. On an iPhone, if you don't sign in, you can use all the default apps and you can't download any apps. So I guess it could work like that, but I don't think anyone actually uses an iPhone that way.
I agree. I'm just saying that like it's kind of been my philosophical point in the sand since Facebook required the Facebook account, was that it could have been optional. That account could have been optional all along, and now we're a year into this. They have gone back and they've changed up their policy. And if it was optional, like it should still do some basic things out of the box until you actually hook it up to an account.
Yeah, or I guess you could have something where, there's a more basic account system that just uses an email address and you don't have to verify an identity or anything like that. And then a Facebook account is the kind of, real name, real identity thing that gives you access to these extra social features. That could make sense.
Yeah, I don't know. But I do think that that's a good point, Ian, about first of all, the choice. And second of all is, would this become mandatory? I don't know. We'll leave that open-ended. I think we should move on to the next piece of news. I could say let's do the time warp again, but it's not called that. Application SpaceWarp gives Quest 2 performance Quest headsets will get a new feature called Application SpaceWarp next week, letting applications run at half frame rate by generating every other frame synthetically. How long would you generate all of the frames synthetically? And we don't even have to put the headset on. The headset just plays its own games because of all the AI going on here. What, Heaney? I was looking at the chat prior to us starting, and there was so many things, and everybody's like, I hope Heaney is here to give us the technical deets on this. So I'm going to hand the mic to you. Explain this to us, please.
Well, just before I explain it, I'm going to unironically answer your question of how long until every frame can be generated synthetically. Just because I actually saw that there's been a few interesting papers on this in the last year, where there's entirely neural rendering, where there's no actual rasterization or ray tracing of any sort being done, and a neural network is generating frames entirely. So probably quite a few years away, if not decades away, from actual products. But it's an interesting idea that some people are actually exploring.
How does tracking work in that situation, in that pipeline, Heaney? How does what
tracking would be one of the inputs it would be one of the real-time inputs, and then it's generating each frame based on the tracking frame that you give it, as in where should it be in this virtual space generating the frame from, and then the data set.
I can't do it, Heaney. Like, I thought I'd like to move my head in one direction, and the frame was rendered there. How does that work?
No. Just the same way that tracking is an input to normal rasterization, the kind of rendering we're doing now, it would just be an input to the network. Just like the input to a voice neural network is, the voice command you're giving it after saying the assistant's name. The input for this would be the tracking data. It's obviously, this is something that's in research only. Generating each frame takes something like 30 seconds on a $3,000 GPU, so it's not something practical, but this idea of entirely neural rendering is something that some companies are looking at. But to come back to the short term, the realistic stuff, what we're seeing here with application SpaceWarp is, as you've alluded to, Kyle, developers will have this feature. They will be able to render at half frame rate, and the system will extrapolate every other frame to bring it back to full frame rate. And so Meta says that even when the overhead is taken into account, this should give developers who want to use this feature 70% more performance to work with. And that's pretty huge. That's like what you'd expect to see in a generation. That's like what you would expect going from Quest 1 to Quest 2, and then to a hypothetical Quest 3 in future. And so just to be clear, though, this is not a user feature. This is not something that's going to be turned on for every app. This is something that developers themselves will implement. And Guy Godin in our comments is saying it's very similar to virtual desktops, SSW, where the game is rendered at half frame rate and the other frames are extrapolated. That's correct. The only difference here is that Meta is having developers submit the depth buffer and motion vectors from their app so that they can generate a very plausible set of artificial frames. And the depth buffer is just like a low resolution version of each frame, where instead of color, you're getting the depth from your eye to the pixel. And the motion vectors are just a representation of the movement of pixels from one frame to the other. So in this frame, as my hand moves across here, the motion vectors would just be a set of arrows essentially going from here to here from each frame. And so when application SpaceWarp has the real frames, the color frames, the depth buffer, and those motion vectors, Meta says that it can actually have almost no visible artifacting in most situations. Though in their Connect video, they pointed out a few edge cases where you definitely will see artifacts, such as transparent hands, and sometimes when you have an object rotating quite artificially. So yeah, this is a really interesting development. We could see games that would otherwise not have come to Quest 2, or we could see Quest 2 apps that have significantly higher fidelity graphics than what we see today.
So I'm going to ask this question since it was brought up in the chat. I think RG, it scrolled way up, so I can't remember. I think it was RG that said this. It's the soap opera effect. But is it? So I've seen this where the interpolation is turned on, extrapolation, all the Asians are used to fake the smoothness. I had that on my television. I turned it on, turned it off. I don't know. There's a little bit different. It's like watching the Lord of the Rings movies, or I think it was The Hobbit. It was 48 frames per second.
Yeah, I did it.
Is this what we're talking about? Is this the same thing, Heaney?
So what you're referring to is interpolation, where the TV increases the latency on purpose because it doesn't matter what the latency of viewing something is as long as they sync the audio up, and actually has the next frame and figures out what is the midpoint between these two frames. This is very different in that it doesn't know what the next frame is, because in VR you want to keep the latency as low as possible, but it has more data to work with. It has depth buffer, as I explained, so it knows the depth of the frames that it's being sent. It knows where the tablet is in front of me versus the cameras in the distance, so it can make a more plausible extrapolation. It also has your head tracking data, so that they can extrapolate if my head was moving from here to here or rotating like this. It can incorporate that. And something I forgot to mention is that this feature is also being launched alongside positional time warp. And so that's what the Meta wants to do to try and bring down the head tracking latency. Because if this was just launched without positional time warp, you would pretty much double your head motion latency. Because if it's extrapolating the next frame and you're moving but you weren't moving before, that frame will be stale. It will be still rendered at the position where your head used to be. But positional time warp is being added for all apps, not just application SpaceWarp apps. And Meta claims, and again, this is their claim, that because of this, any app that's released with application SpaceWarp after the next SDK release, which should be this week, will actually have lower head tracking latency than any app on Quest today, simply because of positional time warp being introduced. Now, that is a very bold claim for them to make, but they made it several times in their Connect presentation. But to be clear, if an app is using positional time warp and not using application SpaceWarp because it's updated, it will be, again, lower latency again. So that is a bit of a trick.
Though, in the chat, Guy in the chat is saying technically input latency would be a bit worse. So probably not great for things like ping pong or fast action games. Those people who are really excited to get some high end FPS, games in here with high graphic and fidelity, your reaction time, the thing that makes you good at this game, wouldn't really be able to take advantage of this feature. What do you think of that, Heaney?
Yeah, that's correct. What can't be fought with any of these fancy techniques, at least not yet, is your actual hand tracking latency. So your controller tracking latency here will almost double. But what Meta is using positional time warp to fight is the head tracking latency. So it should still feel similar, or if not the same, with your head. But once it does come to fast actions like your hands, that's where you will notice this. So this isn't something that's suitable for every app at all.
So, Heaney, given that we've seen the likelihood that future Meta controllers will have cameras on them to track themselves, how likely is it that these technologies are applicable to hands, given that they'll have a similar sort of tracking stack?
Well, it's not really. It doesn't. How your controllers are tracked shouldn't impact this. But we might as well talk about this for what is the next step for a technology like this. And they've kind of hinted at this, and it's the obvious next step, where what if developers could render your hands at full frame rate and everything else at half frame rate? Or even, what if developers could render things that are very close to you at full frame rate and everything in the distance at half frame rate? And that would be the ideal outcome, because then your head tracking latency is still going to be low, your hand latency will be low, things that are close to you won't have distortion or artifacts because they'll be rendered at full. But you can have this much higher fidelity, much higher detailed, potentially larger open world environment out beyond you. And yes, it's rendering half frame rate, but because the further away it gets, the harder it's going to be to tell that this extrapolation is happening, because the pixels are going to be smaller and smaller as you go out, and it's going to be more accurate versus what you would otherwise see.
So if your hand is tracking at a different frequency than what you're seeing, it's possible then that if there's a burp or a hiccup in the GPU while you're trying to render something, your hand could actually go somewhere before your head actually sees it there. Is that
well? If the app were to completely halt and stop rendering frames and you were just using this extrapolation technology, then, and if it did support hand, and just to be clear, today it does not, this is only for your head, everything in the environment, including your hands, will still be extrapolated, to be clear, but only based on its past motion. So if you're moving your hand in any other way than just a linear motion in one direction, you're going to notice that input latency has increased today. What you focus it on is your head, because positional time warp means that as you move your head, before the new frame is presented, it will be warped in the direction that you've moved your head. So it'll be really interesting to see what games this works on and what doesn't. But, as some people have pointed out in the comments, you don't want to have this for something like 11 table tennis. But say a flight simulator, you could probably introduce something that would be a lot higher fidelity than current flight sims on Quest and have almost no noticeable impact to latency.
So Ian kind of alluded to it earlier. What if I think I'm going to go left, but I go right instead, or left and then right, and then try to fool it? What is this? How does this impact people's VR sickness? I guess we can just call it that. Is there any positive or negative, or I wonder if there's been any studies on this yet?
What Heaney was getting at there is every headset sort of optical system, rendering system, the entire pipeline is tuned for maximum head comfort, because that is where you will get sick. If your head, whatever prediction is not matching your head, that's what's going to get at you the quickest. So I remember going back to Daydream and the very first Mirage Solo, there's drift in a lot of these tracking systems, but as long as they center it around your head's comfort and reducing the amount of latency perceptible to your eyeballs, that's how a lot of these systems are working. And then Heaney is kind of explaining how over time they could try to squelch more and more performance out of these pipelines in order to get the most comfort possible for the least amount of compute at the same time.
Yeah, what research does indicate that I've read is that your sensitivity to head latency is much greater than your sensitivity to even hand latency. So even on the hand tracking on Quest today, some people have suggested it may be as high as the optical hand tracking without controllers, as high as 50 or 100 milliseconds, even in the best case scenario. But while it feels sluggish, if your head was at 50 or 100 milliseconds, you would throw up everywhere. It would be a terrible experience. So the reason that they focus on that is because of that, but it's also because your head tracking is the frame that you see. The cameras in VR are your eyes. So because they're extrapolating and warping the motion of the frame itself, it is the head tracking. And before this week's update, Quest only could do that rotationally. So every frame right now that we're seeing is actually being time warped. As we turn our heads, the slight discrepancy between where our head was when rendering began and where our head now is rotating towards as rendering ends, the system is skewing or time warping the frame in that direction. And all that's changing in this new update is that time warp will now be done positionally, so that if you've moved forward, the frame will slightly move forward. If you've moved slightly to the left since rendering began, the frame will be moved slightly to the left, and same for up and down. And the reason they're able to do that is because developers will now be asked, the game engines essentially will be asked to send the system the depth buffer and those motion vectors so that it can use that data. And that also means that apps that don't update to send that will not have positional time warp and will not be able to access asynchronous SpaceWarp. And there's another few requirements that we should probably note in case people are thinking this is going to come to your favorite game in a next week's update. This requires OpenXR. It doesn't support the legacy Oculus API. This requires Vulkan. It doesn't support OpenGL. And on Unity, this requires scriptable render pipelines. It doesn't support the built-in. So there is some work from developers here, and this is not something you're going to see every game support immediately. But the ones that do, if they just support positional time warp, you're going to see much lower latency than you see today on your head. And if they add asynchronous SpaceWarp, they'll be able to deliver higher fidelity graphics or larger, more detailed worlds.
Heaney, one of the last questions here from Robert is sort of the question in my head. Let's think forward to Project Cambria, and the things we know about Project Cambria. It's going to have face tracking and eye tracking. But what if it has significantly higher frame rate, hand tracking or head tracking? How does this technology apply there?
Well, the higher the update rate of the head tracking itself, the more recent that positional time warp process will be getting its data from, because it applies after the frame has already been rendered. Just before it gets pushed to the display, time warp applies so that you get the lowest latency possible head pose. So if your tracking system has updated more recently than an older headset, that head pose is going to be even lower latency. And it'll be really interesting to try this side by side to see how much of an impact it makes, because as I've mentioned, this is something developers can turn on or off by deciding to not submit the depth buffer.
So I was going to actually ask you, Heaney, a question, and then you answered it before I asked it. So I guess that's Heaney warp, is what we'll call it, predictive Heaney warp. I was going to ask you how long before we actually see this technology utilized by developers into a game. I wonder who's going to be the first big developer. Are we going to see a big title like Pistol Whip come out with this first, or I don't know. Ian, have you heard anything? Are we going to see Pistol Whip with SpaceWarp?
Yeah, I saw this comment up from Guy, and Heaney, you've already talked about this a little bit, but Guy was sort of suggesting this is going to be a considerable amount of effort for many devs to take advantage of. Is that the case, Heaney?
Yeah, that Vulkan requirement and OpenXR requirement means developers are going to have to put a lot of work in. The Unity support for Vulkan has been very spotty until recently, and so has Oculus's itself. So developers are going to have to really hope that the last few updates have patched those bugs and make sure that all the systems they're using are compatible with the most recent versions of Unity and Oculus.
So if you're a developer right now working on a title that you're going to, I don't know, maybe say you're going to announce it at some awesome upcoming showcase, winter showcase by some amazing outlet like UploadVR, coming December 2nd, 2021, not February 12th, but December 2nd. For those of you who watched last week's Gamecast, you'll understand. If not, go back and watch it so you can laugh at this joke. How much effort, like backpedaling, are they going to have to do to implement this into a game? And you might not have the answer to that, but I'm curious from a developer standpoint. Did Meta just drop this and then expect all the developers to run out and update their stuff?
Well, as I've sort of mentioned, that OpenXR and Vulkan requirement are the biggest ones. I think in a way this may be a way for Meta to try and push developers towards Vulkan, because what they also announced was that from this next release, Vulkan will be the recommended API rather than OpenGL. And Vulkan obviously has many advantages for performance and other things, but there are a lot of rough edges in Unity's current Vulkan support and in the Oculus integration's Vulkan support. So this is going to be putting work on developers to update to the latest versions, fix any incompatibilities, and then work around any bugs that just happen to still be existing in these versions. Just to answer one quick question from Pseudonymous here, he says, how is SpaceWarp any different from Airlink's ASW? So the Oculus Rift has asynchronous SpaceWarp. The only difference, and Meta claims this is a significant difference, is that whereas on Rift, ASW estimates those motion vectors, so that the movement of pixels between frames, on Quest, this application SpaceWarp has the game engine itself send those motion vectors. And Meta claims that this is such a significant difference in that the input is higher quality that it almost entirely reduces the artifacts. But we'll have to test it out to see if those claims are true.
I'm also curious if there will be some developers, because like you're saying, this is sort of forcing developers to adopt this new technology and not be left behind and using old tech. But is there going to be certain developers, and I don't know if I haven't heard anything, I'm just coming up with this as we have this discussion. Are there going to be developers who are going to say, no, I don't want to use this feature because I don't want to use OpenXR?
Yeah, so I'm seeing this comment from Guy as well, saying it's probably going to be new developers who use this feature, and I think that's the case for a lot of these technologies, and it's one of the underlying kind of, if you want to see a couple years ahead into the VR market, this root issue is what you need to kind of wrap your head around, where the switch over to OpenXR is very, very good for the industry at large, but it actually puts a fair amount of pressure on original older devs to upgrade to a new version of the engine that they're using in order to like access some of these new features. And I would recommend going to uploadvr.com and reading Jamie Feltham's editorial he just put up today, because it kind of discusses some of the tension here, where Facebook or Meta is investing so much into this ecosystem and getting new games made that there's kind of an imbalance here where, like, you've got 5 years now of great PC built content on PC systems, but there's not a ton of new content being built for PC first. It's been this process over the last 3 years of more and more things getting built for Quest first. And right now, there's no real push uh, to make devs want to build for PC first going forward. And if you've got a lot of new applications being constructed in the next 2 years, you could see this real shift in the momentum around anything. Like right now, if people develop an application, they usually develop it for Quest, PC, and PSVR, and that's actually really great for all the consumers out there. But over the long run, with things like this happening, maybe people just want to develop it for Quest and don't want to go through the effort to put it on the other systems.
The only other question that I have about this technology, and then I'll let you go into some more sciencey stuff here, Heaney, is could this potentially give us the ability to run the game at 72 frames per second, but have it turn into 144 frames per second on a higher speed display for a future headset? Is that ridiculous, or is that something that we might see?
No, that's not ridiculous at all. And in fact, just to be clear, this current technology is not limited to 36 to 72. Developers can go 45 to 90, or they can go 60 to 120. And I think that I would really like to try that personally, 60 to 120, to see how well that works. That could be interesting. Guy Godin pointing out that very few developers use Vulkan, and that's true. The Quest's support for Vulkan is even quite recent, as is Unity's and OpenXR's. Another few comments saying, oh, my comments is frozen. One of you can continue for now until I find it.
Well, if Vulkan is, I mean, maybe they should do an open source version, called Romulan.
Yeah, fine.
Star Trek fans? Anyone? Okay.
Well, Vulkan is open source. It's from the Kronos group. It's the same people who made OpenGL. It is essentially the successor to OpenGL. But just to come back to your question of what games are going to use this, and maybe will it be future games? Think of the games that you play on Quest today that are definitely slightly pushing the platform a bit too much, and you can see constant frame drops, and it's not really up to performance. Games that are a little bit larger open world than most Quest games that have a little bit better graphics. Brandon C in the comments here points out the Blade and Sorcery developer has already said that their title meets the requirements for application SpaceWarp. I think that's a great example, because Jamie pointed out in his review that while Blade and Sorcery is an incredible achievement to come to Quest, the performance right now just isn't up to standard. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, that's a game I would bet, I would heavily bet is going to be using a technology like this to be possible. I'd say if we hear other larger scale titles announced from Meta in the next year for Quest, you can bet on those using application SpaceWarp. So a lot of this platform's kind of wider market gaming appeal depends on how well this technology really works, which is why and of course, I'm sure many of the commenters here are very eager to give it a try and see, just how many artifacts are there and how noticeable is it, and does this really feel close to native frame rate?
Ian, were you just attempting to do the
I've seen in the comments, for the the Spock signal, and
it actually works better backwards, aiming at my head. If I look at my hand, So, okay, well, I mean, what else do we say about this? I mean, other than the fact that we're not actually going to see practical application of this for a few minutes. I mean, it's going to be a little while.
I saw a comment here asking Heaney whether we could see 2 XR2s used in a future headset to double the processing power, and I think that question really goes to the core of people trying to wrap their heads around, like, what we're seeing with the current systems is like VR headsets, standalone VR headsets, inching up to present day slowly in the capabilities of what games they can play. And right now we're on 2005 era games. This technology should be able to boost it up at least a couple of years, I would think.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. As we talked about last time, standalone is at PlayStation 2 level. Could application SpaceWarp give us PlayStation 3 level games on Quest 2? It's an open question. It certainly seems like it's potentially possible.
It's like 7-minute abs, no 6-minute abs. That's what's cool. All right. Well, have we?
Was that a reference to There's Something About Mary from like
that
you just dug deep for that one. Wow.
I and I haven't seen that movie in so long, but yes. All right. So do we want to say anything else more about this before we get into some PlayStation news?
I think it's a good segue to move on to PlayStation.
All right. So next piece of news. Here we go. PlayStation patent, or as our friends across the pond say, patent. PlayStation patent shows eye tracking and foveated rendering. A recently published patent filed from PlayStation details eye tracking technology that we could see in whatever PSVR's new nickname is, and PSVR2 is what we've been calling it. I want to know, somebody out there at Sony, I might have to send some emails. PSVR1 was called Project Morpheus. For those of you dedicated fans out there, I'll say it again, Project Morpheus. What is this new one called, I wonder? Do they have, Ian, have you heard, has the new PlayStation VR headset, does it have a project name?
I have not heard one. It's one of these things, we've been very careful in our naming, where everyone has already named it PlayStation VR2, but they don't actually use the PlayStation VR2 branding in any of their verbiage. So it's still the jury's still out on what this thing is going to be called. Even on the project front, I haven't heard an official name.
I think the commenters here, NGVR, I've heard that before somewhere, so I think they may be onto something. I think Next Gen VR is what it's referred to by Sony, though I can't remember where I saw that. The commenters here will probably enlighten us as to where they saw it.
That does sound right.
I'm kind of curious. Next Gen VR. I mean, it's okay. I mean, it doesn't matter what they call it as long as it does what we want it to do, right? I mean, they can call it Stewart if they want. I'd still play with it. I don't know why I picked Stewart. I have nothing wrong with the name Stewart. I have a friend named Stewart. So, okay. So what do we know about this? Obviously, eye tracking allows for foveated rendering. So where your eye looks, it makes that clear and the rest of it blurry. And that's something that helps when you're trying to cram a lot of performance into something that maybe can't necessarily handle it. But I also want to know how this plays along with that new Gear VR type of thing that we saw floating around there. The Sony phone inside of what is that?
Yeah.
How does that play in?
So, Heaney, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just that's from Sony's Xperia division. I think that's just a marketing gimmick, or an accessory to try and sell a few phones. I don't think that would have any relation to its PlayStation division, which is working on, from what we understand from the reporting so far, a serious headset for high-end gaming on PlayStation 5.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought maybe that would be it. Is that you just go out and buy this Xperia phone and then it just plugs into your PS5. I mean, why not, right? It's mobile. It's corded? I don't know.
It's just a little plastic cardboard kind of thing. I think it's just for viewing 360 videos. Like I said, it's same thing with Samsung. People don't realize the Gear VR was essentially just a value add to try and sell more Samsung phones. It was never a grand VR strategy from Samsung, and I don't think that's what we're seeing with Sony's Xperia add-on either.
What do we actually know about the PlayStation's next headset? Is it going to be mobile? Is it going to be wireless? Is it going to be wired? Is it going to be purple? I mean, I feel like we don't know enough about it. Do we even know when we're going to see this?
Yeah, so what we know, what we've confirmed at this point is it's going to have some sort of gaze tracking, probably eye tracking to see where you're looking. It's going to be a wired device using a USB cable going from your PS5 to your headset, and inside-out tracking is how it's going to be tracked. And we've seen the controllers, these controllers that we've seen the DualSense controllers that have these triggers that really give you sensitive haptic feedback and even pressure pushing back at you. The button's actually pushing back at you. We expect that technology to be in these separate hand controllers. And everything I just outlined is going to be most of the major massive upgrades that it's going to be next generation PSVR. I mean, the first generation PSVR, they were hitting the absolute bare minimum of resolution that they could manage. They were getting a great, comfortable device that you could wear for a maximum amount of time. Great field of view. They did all these things, but it was a minimum viable product. You could only face forward. There's this opportunity with the next generation PSVR, even if it's a wired experience, to turn the PlayStation 5 into a powerhouse VR machine.
I wonder in terms of processing power, and I know, Heaney, we have discussed this prior, but will the PS5 push a headset better than a PC could with a decent GPU? I mean, what are we talking about in terms of power performance from a PS5? What kind of expectations should we have for this new headset?
So yeah, as we discussed when the PlayStation 5 was announced and when the PlayStation VR controllers were announced, the PlayStation 5 is a very powerful console. You're not talking about the highest end PC probably, but it's a mid to high end graphics card is the kind of equivalent you're going to see. So if that's being paired here with foveated rendering, as we've heard in Ian's reporting in the past and in more detail in this patent application, we could see something that exceeds anything that we're seeing on PC VR today, because we actually haven't seen foveated rendering come into the PC VR space yet on a wide scale. There are some headsets you can get with eye tracking add-ons. There is the Vario Aero now, which has eye tracking, but there's no universal, widely adopted SDK for actually implementing foveated rendering on PC. And so, if in all of the top Steam VR games that you buy, none of them support foveated rendering. So if Sony has this baked in at the ecosystem level and developers are supporting it across the board, and you already have this highly powerful console that's sitting in people's living rooms, we could see PlayStation VR, at least for a while, take over the title of high-end VR from the PC space, especially if we're seeing this with Sony-funded serious AAA scale games, because we're just not seeing that in the PC space right now.
Man, a lot of people are going to be upset. Is PC VR dead? No, it's just a console now. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're all waiting for whatever Steam Deck standalone PC VR headset might exist. If that actually, there's a whole generation of VR gamers, I think, crying out for Valve to produce that exact device, not a consoleized PC, a PC VR headset that is a standalone PC that you wear on your head. Like that's what so many people out there are saying. I'll pay $300 or $400 extra over Quest for that and only that.
Yeah, I know price point does have to have a factor in all of this too. I guess I wonder. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess the problem is, obviously that's all rumors and speculation, but if Valve does decide to release this standalone headset, that's actually Valve going from the high end down into the low end where Quest is, because that's a processor that has to fit inside a headset, and the laws of physics mean that that's not going to be anywhere near as powerful as a PlayStation 5 that is this size plugged into your mains power and has a fan that's bigger than the fan about the size of your head attached to a console that can draw hundreds of watts. So that's why I say, regardless of what Valve does in that approach, we really could see PlayStation VR through PlayStation 5 become this new high end of VR. And where you see on Quest, people say, I like this wireless experience, I like the cost, but what I don't like is that there really aren't those high fidelity graphics, meaty games that I play on my normal PC or consoles. PlayStation VR2 or whatever it's called could be the place for that as we go forward, where traditionally it's been PC VR.
So, Guy in the comments is mentioning that, where is his comment? Lost it here. He was just mentioned it, but
I've got it here.
Yeah.
Can you see mine? I don't know.
Go ahead, read it off.
I was going to say,
Carmack has said multiple times that foveated rendering wasn't adding much benefits because the speed of eye tracking wasn't fast enough. To go off of what Heaney was saying there, I'm convinced that if Sony is able to pull off foveated rendering in a significant way, they have to have Half-Life Alyx running on that device. And there's an opportunity for Half-Life Alyx to spend another couple of years here as the cornerstone application that you refer people to, in looking for the cutting edge of VR game design. And I say that only if they can improve the gravity gloves with foveated rendering and eye tracking, using the gravity gloves and the eyes tracking to target for the item that you're looking at any given time, that will, combined with the foveated rendering improvements, make a PS5 the ultimate way to enjoy Half-Life Alyx. That's a lot of ifs, but it's what I would expect if Deckard or whatever Valve is trying to prepare as far as a standalone device is a couple of years down the road. This is a perfect opportunity to move some of the Steam APIs forward by getting Half-Life Alyx ready to run on foveated rendering and with that extra added targeting you could do.
For sure, yeah. A lot of people in the comments are saying, a console can never top a PC and you can upgrade specs. And yeah, from a technical perspective, you're right. You can always go and build a PC that will outperform the PlayStation 5. But if there's no PC headset that you can affordably buy with eye tracking, and there's no AAA games while Sony is releasing AAA games on PlayStation 5 left, right, and center, does it really matter that you've got the most powerful machine there if it doesn't have the content or headset to actually take advantage of it? That's the thing. It's one of those situations where, I've always been a PC gamer. I've always been one of those people who loves to build a high-end PC and get this performance that's better than a console and customize and use mods. But at the end of the day, if there isn't a content ecosystem behind it, it really doesn't matter unless we want to be playing the same old PC VR games that we've been playing for the past 5 years. If no company or publisher is going to fund AAA games for the platform, then a PlayStation 5 that is 80% as powerful as your PC, but has all of these games and this new headset with foveated rendering is going to be the place where high-end VR lives for consumers that want to get into it. And that it is a shame. I would love to see a developer or publisher or a platform holder like Valve start investing in AAA PC VR content, but I don't know of any that's doing it.
My point there, Heaney, is that there's if you're looking at the timeline here, and everyone is begging for Valve to do a standalone, I don't think they're ready. I can't imagine them marshaling their resources to match what Facebook has done in a reasonable amount of time, or Sony for that matter. There's just too much of an investment on Valve's front in making sure PCs are the platform that they own. And then there's too much of an effort on Sony's front to make sure the PS5 is going to beat Xbox in this next generation. It's these two companies' focus is on those two priorities. They need if they're going to try to catch Facebook or Meta, the next generation makes sense to focus on pushing the high end as far as they can, and then both of them catch up like 2, 3, 4 years down the line with an answer to the Quest 3.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting to think of who is going to be competing with who in these kind of stages. There's going to be a strange overlap where Valve will be the one to compete with Sony and Meta at the same time if they go down that strategy, while Meta will be sitting on the low end and Sony sitting on the high end in their own way.
So I'm gonna looking at the comments here. Yoko VR, I hear you making this comment. We abandon PC. We go back to stock games with no mods and freedoms. I love modding games. I love, getting frustrated at a game and downloading a trainer and then cheating and being done with it in 20 minutes. I love doing that. And that's something that you kind of can't do when you have this console type of concept. And a lot of the PC VR gamers, the true dedicated fans, they love their mods. Do we think that we'll ever see consoles truly adopt that type of uncontrolled modifications of their titles and things like that? Because I don't.
Well, I would say something like a Quest is actually a lot more open than something like a Switch or an Xbox. You can actually install old games like Quake, etc. on Quest. You can install mods for some titles. I've heard Blade and Sorcery, from what I was reading yesterday, is thinking of trying to add mod support to Quest. But as you've said, and as the commenters are pointing out, that's a far cry from the real type of do whatever you want. The files are sitting there in a completely open file system with no platform holder having any sort of, platform content policy that you have on PC. And that's why it is a shame that we've seen this kind of lack of investment in PC VR compared to other kinds of VR recently, because this is such an experimental phase of this technology, and you do want to see content creators be able to build mods that do things that games companies just haven't thought of yet. So it is a shame that we're seeing this trend, but it is what it is, and that's the current state of the market that we're in.
And I think Sexy Bicycle gets it. The comment is, that's why I think Deckard would be the perfect middle ground. I imagine mods and open content would still be very available. And this is the concept of a PC on my face, not a closed mobile architecture that doesn't give you the option to do deeper mods and things like that. So you're assuming a lot about Deckard, that it's going to be this ultimate open-ended platform. And I mean, what gives Valve that freedom? Just the operating system it runs? I mean, what would give Deckard that option?
Steam only exists. Valve only exists as the entity it is today because of the openness of the PC as a platform. They were only able to do what they were able to do with Steam based on the openness of the platform. And that's their MO going forward. And they've actually got like a little bit of an ally in Microsoft, in both of them approaching, agreeing more or less that the PC is an open platform. It's going to keep that way. There's things Microsoft has had to deal with from its operating system strategy of like ensuring that they can run secure versions of Windows, and like Windows isn't going to automatically open you up to viruses for decades to come. Like Microsoft needs to make PC a more secure computing experience while at the same time leaving it as an open platform. And that's where Valve and Microsoft differ a little bit. But like, yeah, PC is this open platform that actually lets you bring parts that you want to bear on the system. And even on the Valve Index headset, you've got a USB slot on the headset itself, so you can do whatever you want with it.
You bring up something very spooky, Ian. How long? Because, Brandon C here, Steam Deck is completely open, and that shows their intent. So it's safe to assume Deckard would be the same. What if it is? You mentioned the word virus, and I hadn't thought about that. The open system. Has Steam Deck gotten a virus yet? Has anybody seen Steam Deck with a virus? Because if they can, then that would allude to the fact that Deckard could get a virus.
Did you ever see?
And then suddenly you have a headset on. Huh?
You ever see Die Hard 2?
I think so.
So in the plot of that movie, there is some bad guys, terrorists, who more or less hijacked the air traffic control system and tell planes that the ground is at a different spot than it
That's
actually
right.
is,
Yes,
and
yes.
can crash planes that way. I mean, any system, any VR headset system that allows you to uh, overwrite what the Guardian is telling you is potentially very, very dangerous virus system. And these platform holders have to make some very hard choices about what they'll allow to tell you different about the physical reality around you.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. You can't have the freedom to sideload without the danger that sometimes you may sideload something that has a virus. That could happen. And it was very interesting to see that just last week or the week before, we have the complete opposite end of the spectrum from Valve. Apple were on stage with a giant sign behind them saying, sideloading is a cyber criminal's best friend. And they were arguing, I think it was the Web Summit, or I can't remember, the Code Summit, whatever it's called. They were making the argument that sideloading should never be allowed. And that's why Apple doesn't allow sideloading, because it can help cyber criminals. And so, that's obviously a very spurious argument, to say the least. But you're going to have this spectrum where consumers can decide. You have on one end Apple, who say you can't sideload at all. You'll have this middle spectrum of Meta, where you can sideload as long as you go through their hoops and you dance exactly the way they want you to dance, and you sign to say it's your responsibility. And then, as we see on Steam Deck, you'll have this other spectrum, if the same strategy is followed through with Deckard, if that's a thing, where you can just do whatever you want and Valve doesn't tell you what to do. And that is the trade-off. Over here you have perfect security, and over here you have perfect freedom, but you can't have both.
So the thing I want to add to what Heaney just described is the Facebook and Meta are so far ahead that the only thing I can imagine I would want to do with a Deckard headset right now is turn it into a Quest. Like, that's the only...
That's great.
Yeah, it's like the only content ecosystem, the apps I want to use, the only place that I want to go in standalone VR right now is what Facebook has built. And so I would want to turn a Deckard into a Quest in order to get that whole experience without, I could delete it off the headset anytime I want, is, I guess, the advantage there.
If there are any Valve people watching this right now working on the Deckard team, if it exists, they just threw their computer out the window hearing you say that the only thing you want to do with the Deckard is turn it into a Quest.
Well, at this time, that's how far ahead Quest is. That's just my way of saying you got to catch up. You're that far behind.
Yeah, I think if Deckard is a thing, as is rumored in the way that we think it is, it's going to be a lot more similar to Quest than some people think. It's not going to be this magical middle ground that somehow violates the laws of physics and gives you better graphics and hardware than a mobile chip, while somehow also being standalone. It's going to be, based on what we've heard described, some kind of Quest Pro-like device, and it's not going to be anything magically different.
We've all been in this industry long enough to know that the unannounced, with no known features headset is always going to be the best headset that will come out someday. I mean, we've all heard it over and over. This is going to be the hot headset. How many of you ran out and bought a G2 Reverb? How many of you? Seriously. That was supposed to be like the bee's knees, right? I don't know if bees have knees. I think bees have knees. But yeah, I mean, seriously, how many times have we heard that headset that we don't know anything about yet, that's going to be the one that I'm waiting for?
I think it's funny, like Oculus Killer, like Facebook has such a lock on this market so far. Like Oculus Killer is the thing we come back to, Rift Killer, going back several years. But like, I think it's, again, Facebook is so far out in front. They're killing their stuff left and right themselves to make room for whatever is next that Facebook wants to build. Like, they're going to kill it themselves so that no one else can. They're just going to get on to the next thing.
Yeah. So, RG, you did buy the G2. Good. That's fantastic. And Onakazi, I did. And that has tempered me to not bite on the Lynx and the Deca. see the promise of something, and Ian, yes, to your point, Meta. Does metakiller.com, does that exist yet? That's my URL for the show to go out. Somebody go out and get it. They're killing off the Oculus stuff. This is a good lead in for our next piece of news here. That I remember when Heaney, do you want to grab something before I tell this long anecdote?
Yeah, I was just gonna pick up on one last comment here. Daniel Kaz says Deckard split rendering wireless PCR VR would be ideal. Yeah, it would, but that's already what we have on Quest today. Guy Godin shipped that in May 2019 for Oculus Quest. It was called Virtual Desktop PC VR. Split rendering has taken this kind of magical understanding in the VR community as recent, but it's just Qualcomm's name for exactly what Virtual Desktop and Airlink already do today. So that would be great to have that to happen, and I expect it. But again, it just makes it even more similar to a Quest. But yeah, let's move to the next one.
I see a lot of people asking about Pimax, and I think we'll just say as soon as we have updated sort of hands-on impressions about Pimax, we're going to deliver them. But we've got to get our hands on their new hardware in order to have any opinions to share that are...
Yeah, Pimax, if you're listening, send us some headsets so we know what to talk about.
I'm not sure that
need the hardware.
I'm not sure that one's actually existing yet. Pre-orders open in summer, and it's supposed to ship at the end of next year. So I'm not 100% sure it actually exists yet outside of a few engineering prototypes.
Engineering prototypes. I think that's where I'm going with this. It's like I expect there to be an 8-month development cycle where they're going to send out sample units over the course of the development of that product, and we'll be upfront if they send us development things that are like proving out display tracking, hand tracking, controllers, whatever, all the things that you would want to test. We'll test them out and say, it either fulfilled these things that Pimax said it fulfilled or it didn't. But we've got to have the hardware in our hands to be able to test those things.
And I own a Pimax 5K that I purchased off of a Kickstarter backer who didn't want it anymore. So I got a good deal on it. Ian, have you had Pimax send you any hardware at all?
No. I think one of our previous staffers did get some Pimax hardware, but no, I haven't actually had a Pimax headset in my house.
Okay. All right. So kind of have to have it, right? So
yeah, we'll talk to them. We're on. They've been cordial to us, talking to us about sort of their plans and their goals here, and they've got a long history there of promising a lot of things, having to change plans, and then come up with new sort of options for everyone. And this is like the big game now, right? Like PSVR was small compared to the market opportunity we've got with standalone, and if they're able to pull off a great headset, we want to test and make sure that we tell our audience exactly what it does and does not do.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So back to my story that will lead and segue in. I went back and looked for it in December of 2016. I was at the Denver International Airport with my family, traveling back home for Christmas. And I noticed that there was a Facebook store there, a Facebook store that was showing the Gear VR. I remember going in, and I have this video, and I can share it if somebody wants to see it. It's not on YouTube. It's only on my Facebook channel. And in December of 2016, when I walked into this Facebook branded store, anywhere in that store was the Oculus logo, was the word Oculus, other than the fact that it was printed on the side of the Gear VR powered by Oculus. And I asked numerous times from the people that worked there, where is Oculus? Where is Oculus anywhere in this branding? And it just didn't exist. So with all that being said, and again, I can share that video if somebody wants to see it. Our last piece of news today, Meta, not Facebook, Meta plans physical stores to showcase headsets and glasses. The locations would allow people to try headsets and glasses before buying. as per the New York Times. Ian, you kind of segued perfectly because of Meta killing brands. Now we're going to see Meta stores.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they going to be permanent? Are they going to be, like an Apple store? What do we know about this?
This has been obvious for a long time. This is what Apple did in its build out towards the iPhone in advance of shipping hundreds of millions of iPhones to people globally. They built a retail presence where they could dictate price, dictate the user experience, get people on board with their devices exactly the way they should be, and kind of serve as like an example for how you actually sell these devices. And the exact same thing, even more so, is more important to do that with VR headsets and AR glasses going forward, because it's not just about actually what you can do with these devices and educating them, it's about the fitting. And the fitting is going to be one of these things that over the next decade or two, they're going to want to build these devices in a more and more personalized way. Your specific head shape, your specific way of perceiving the world, the distance between your eyes, all these things could have a huge effect on how long you're willing to wear these headsets on your head. And they can all be improved by just custom fitting these devices and really building them for your eyeglasses. Like you, Kyle, your bespectacled individual thing that you go back to every week.
I
We
didn't
need
say
to
it yet
have.
this week.
Yeah, I know. We
You beat me to
those headsets need to be tuned for individuals and get those prescriptions. And there's a great way to kind of streamline that whole experience for people to just come in, pick up their headset that's tuned for them, walk out, or if they're not in that position to buy, they actually have a first-time experience with a headset. I'll go even one step further and say, I can't wait for some VR headset company to buy a whole frickin' mall and turn it into a mini amusement park.
There are plenty of opportunities. If Meta wanted to, they could go around the United States and buy all the empty malls. They could make a full map of that mall and turn them into the ultimate Space Pirate Arena Center. Somebody mentioned that in the comments, and I just kept thinking of that thought. How brilliant would that be?
So a lot of people haven't been to Facebook's headquarters. I've been to Facebook headquarters. I've seen their offices, and I remember someone at Facebook telling me that it's a little bit like Disneyland. Like they either had designers who built Disneyland or worked on Disneyland come and build Facebook's headquarters. I would really, really not be surprised to see them convert their headquarters into an AR testing ground or like a VR testing ground to try this stuff at world scale and then expand out to like places like malls and take that concept further.
So my personal opinion is that the store is a fantastic idea. I think that the idea of going into a store, because for the longest time, people had this notion that VR was not for them. And I kept saying to people early on, no, you just got to try it. You have to try it to understand. And I really think that the store will open up that opportunity for more mainstream adoption. That's my opinion personally. Other people can think differently.
Yeah, we have to remember most people still haven't tried VR yet. That's a very hard thing to believe if you're someone who uses VR all the time, but most people still haven't even tried it. So, as you said, this is a New York Times report, and what they suggest is that the purpose of these stores is not merely to sell products, but just to actually get people to try out headsets and glasses for the first time. Obviously, AR glasses down the line when those are technically possible to be a product. And so you could have people come in off the street who have never tried VR, see what it's like, and decide whether the technology is ready yet for them to buy it. And some people will go in there and they'll try it and they go, this is a little bit too heavy for me. This is a little bit, the graphics aren't quite there yet. But others will go in and go, oh my God, this is one of the coolest things I've ever tried. Just like a lot of people who demo VR off a friend. And they'll go out and they'll look into VR headsets and they'll join into the industry. And I think that's a great thing. It's such a suitable product type for a physical store that it's surprising it hasn't happened before. But I think that's probably the pandemic that would have stopped that from happening in the near term.
I mean, I remember evangelizing VR to as many people as I could when it first started. And, I would take a headset to somebody's house or a Christmas gathering. The kids, I was bigger than Santa during Christmas that one year. Sorry, Santa. I have friends named Santa, so it's fine. And I put the headset on, and I'm showing it to all these kids and they're loving it. And I'm showing it to some people. And, it was early on in the days and they put it on, they take it off and they're like, no, the shark still looks fake. I don't know if a store is, obviously the store will be able to evolve as well. Like you alluded to, Heaney, that someday, and somebody in the chat said it too, someday they'll show the AR stuff. Someday they'll do full scans for your avatar creation. And sometime the store has room for evolution as well. But I don't think the store should be in a mall. I don't think it should just be a kiosk in the middle. I think it needs to be somewhere special, like they put, there's a Starbucks in the Kroger's or, whatever. Where should they put these stores, Ian? I'm really curious what you think.
Well, so we didn't, this isn't on our list of news for this week, but Facebook did sort of announce that they're bringing their Star Wars Galaxy's Edge experience to a location in downtown Disney. And what's notable about that is that basically for this holiday season, Meta is going to have its headsets in that district to do hands-on demonstrations to people of the current state of the VR market. Now, for those of you who remember, downtown Disney had a Void location, and you could go in and spend $40 per ticket or $30 per ticket to have a 20-minute experience walking through the Star Wars universe. You could go and put a backpack on and a VR headset, and it's actually an Oculus headset buried beneath all that gear, and you could go into the Star Wars universe and come out and have you had a location-based $30 experience, and you came out of that experience with 4 of your friends potentially, and it cost you more than $100 to have this 20-minute experience with your friends, and you look at each other and go, that was cool, but was that worth the money? And those conversations were actually pretty ugly. Like I can't remember anyone coming out of those experiences and going, yeah, I'm going home to get a VR headset right now. Whereas if you went and did a demo of the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge experience and you come out of there and you go, how much is this headset? Do I need anything else? The conversation starts making a lot more sense when you find out that it's only $300 and you literally don't need anything outside of the headset itself and maybe the 2 controllers. That's a very different conversation. Apple always put their Apple stores in the places where people were most likely willing to buy a high-end phone. And I would not be surprised to see Quests going for the same locations as those first Apple stores.
Yeah,
I love all the oh, go ahead, Heaney.
No, sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
Well, I was just going to say I'm watching the chat and I'm loving the Meta store inside the Food Lion, inside of an Old Navy. I'm actually really curious to see where these Meta stores do pop up, because they do need to be, they can't just go and buy all the old Void locations. Is that too soon? Sorry. I hope Void comes back. I really do. But no, where are these stores going to be? That's a really good. I would love to hear the most. Tweet to me or tweet to UploadVR the most absurd places for Meta to put the stores. I want to see Photoshop come out on your computer. I want to see photos.
As Ian said, it does seem likely that we'll see it in the same types of locations as Apple Store, because anywhere you're going to see those kind of tech consumers be walking around ready to buy products is going to be pretty similar. But just to be clear, this report is not suggesting some kind of pop-up stall or some kind of temporary store in a store, because it contrasted these plans to Facebook's old strategy, where sometimes you would see a Quest or a Rift demo station in Best Buy, and you would have in some Best Buys an entire section as an Oculus section. This report is suggesting that Meta's plans are around their own store, where on the outside it would be branded Meta Store or something like that, and the sole purpose of this store would be for these headsets and glasses. So the report did note that this is something that may not go ahead. They haven't fully decided whether to go ahead with it, but that they have been in advanced plans for the past year. And here's a direct quote: that if the plans do go ahead, the plan is to eventually span the world.
So Matt's comment here: if the Meta Store offered a 10 meter by 10 meter play space, people could rent a 30-minute time slot to play Space Pirate Trainer, for instance, I could see that being a success. And that's exactly what I'm thinking. You've seen the Microsoft stores where you could go in there and test an Xbox or a Kinect, and all the laptops are out there. Those didn't work. Microsoft stores suck. People, I don't think those Microsoft stores were a success, but they did do a lot to make people aware that Microsoft had its own brand, that they didn't only make devices that were branded by other companies. But like, I'm thinking about the Apple stores and the ability to go in there and book an appointment to learn how to do something more with your Mac or your iPhone that you couldn't do before. That's the kind of service that you could be going for with a large enough space for Space Pirate Arena.
So I'm actually going to disagree on that. I don't think they should show Space Pirate Arena or Arena Scale, and I don't think they will. And the reason I'm saying that is that I think they should and will want to present the experience that a customer will actually have at home. Facebook isn't in the Arena Scale business. It's not trying to sell you a VR arcade. It's trying to sell you a headset to take home and use in your house. And a big part of that is, I think it would maybe scare people off a bit to see, do I really need this 10 meter by 10 meter space for this product? I think we'll see something a lot smaller, and maybe even just have you standing there, with the idea being, this is a product that you can buy in your home, rather than this is something that you could have if you had a massive garage sitting
some version of toy box like experience.
Yeah, or even just first steps or something like that. Or maybe for gamers, they'll ask you what game you want to play. They put you in Resident Evil, they put you in Grand Theft Auto, something like that. Just the classic, trying to sell people on the type of experience they want to buy at home.
Is there like a corner there where I can go into Horizon Workrooms with a friend? Yeah, that's going to be fun.
Well, I'm going to disagree and agree with both of you at the same time, because I think that the store needs to do both. I think it needs to be a small store that you start off here, but then in the back there's like an arcade area. I think they need to do both, because I think that there is value to both. And the more room that they have out there for them to show you what you could sit somebody down, show them Toy Box. Oh, look at this here, throw me the ball, big deal. If somebody takes the headset off and goes, I want more, they go, okay, step here behind the beads and we have all the fun stuff. I think they need to have both.
So I've thrown this out there as well, that Spaces, the company that did some various location-based entertainment experiences, they got bought by Apple. And one of the less technologies Spaces was developing was like their answer to Workrooms. They had their own version of exactly what Horizon Workrooms is for Meta, and now they're at Apple. But the expertise that those people that are now at Apple had was in building like a version of a store for VR. And like it's not inconceivable for us to have a future version of the Apple Store as well that does a lot of these same things.
Make sure it's not the Apple Store that has all the glass all the way around it. That would be bad.
Yeah.
I think Chris Richardson has hit it on the head here when he says, we've missed the obvious demo thing. It's going to be Beat Saber. Of course it is. Chris Richardson is completely right. At this Meta Store, I think we can confidently say the demo game will be Beat Saber.
What you're doing though is you're introducing a whole bunch of sweaty, nasty headsets though.
Yeah, but they can just replace the
No,
facial
so like
interface. The facial interface
think
is
about
detachable.
think about a
That's true.
table that has like a portal device on it that's displaying the mixed reality of the Beat Saber game.
Ooh,
And you're
yeah.
sitting there watching your friend just go into Beat Saber, play another Beat Saber. Like, it just makes so much sense. Everything comes together.
I hate how true this is, but mixed reality really does sell people on VR. I hate how true that is, but it really does. It proves
Facebook
how
proved
cool
it.
it is.
Facebook data driven proved it, that they had store pages where the trailer was shown as just a traditional trailer, and then they had another version of the store page that showed a mixed reality version of the trailer, and they showed that the mixed reality version of the store page was more successful for the developer.
You know what I want? I want a VR experience where I watch a real person doing mixed reality.
Oh, so you would see them in 3D?
Yeah.
The interesting, like a spectator. Yeah, I could see that being the long term. There's a lot of practical, technical issues there, but looking out in the long term future, some kind of 3-dimensional spectating could be the future. Today you sit and watch a screen of someone else playing a video game on Twitch, but in VR, there's a potential that you could be standing beside them virtually as a ghost while they're playing through their game. That would interesting to think if that could be a thing.
Yeah. I'm a visionary. That's what it is. I'm a visionary. Ian, I don't know. With all of this news, do we feel like that the big news cycle? Do we have enough to anticipate for the next couple weeks, next couple months? Is this the calm before the storm? How do we feel right now about the current news in the VR scene?
Very, very interesting question. I don't know how defensive Apple and Google are feeling at this moment in time. In my opinion, they should feel incredibly defensive and fearful of what Meta is about to unleash on them. And they should be out there firing on all cylinders with what their future platforms are going to be. We just had Niantic come out today and describe some of their AR platform's fundamental features of real-time multiplayer tools to be able to log in with others and have like a real-time AR game. Now is not the time for Apple to be behind.
Yeah. I watched that Lightship Niantic stuff, and it's very promising. I like their kind of yin yang 3-part type of thing, understanding, mapping, and sharing. I dig that. I really dug a lot of the words that they use to describe what they're doing. I think it all makes really good sense. How much of that will play into the rest of how this metaverse is evolving, is changing, is being created, and who it's being created by? I think there's a lot of unanswered questions. But yeah, I don't know.
There's this comment in that presentation from Niantic about a peer-to-peer network stack. And I think Heaney and I have kind of gone back and forth on this quite a bit. We talked about Space Pirate Arena earlier in this show. I want to know how these devices are going to function with only a local area connection to the other devices in your area. We have yet to see how mesh networking is going to operate at global scale with millions of devices capable of talking to other nearby devices. And like, I'm curious how Niantic is going to work with, like, whether it's P2P, peer-to-peer networking stack is actually going to work at that scale, or whether somebody else is going to come up with the technology to work at that scale. If I go to a city square and there's 50 other people playing the same exact game as me, I need to be seeing 49 other devices all like floating around the square in real time. Whoever has that technology stack nailed down in the best possible way, that they're going to be the winners of this next generation of computing.
I'd wager that the company that sorts that out won't do it through peer-to-peer. They'll just use your phone's 4G or 5G connection, and likely glasses will have to do it through seem like it's peer-to-peer and it'll seem local, but really behind the scenes, it'll just be going through standard internet.
Yeah,
Though
well,
I could be completely wrong.
I mean, Heaney, I think what we just described is the fundamental, like, Meta saying they want interoperability between devices in order for this metaverse to work. We're describing the networking layer that needs to work between devices from different manufacturers. And I just don't know who's going to win that technology battle.
Well, when we talk about Apple, I would also wonder, is there a possibility that Apple just says, no, we don't want that? You know, you can't message someone on iMessage or FaceTime someone on FaceTime that doesn't have an Apple device. Well, sorry, actually, FaceTime just this year, 10 years, 11 years in, added the ability to join from the web. But you still can't on iMessage, and you still can't really use the full functionality of FaceTime. So I wonder, will Apple just decide, no, this stays within our ecosystem and it doesn't leave? And as a commenter said here, it's unlikely that Apple will use the phrase metaverse simply because it has meta in it, and that's going to be likely their biggest competitor this decade.
All right, Heaney, do you think I'll put both you, Kyle, and Heaney on the spot? Do you think we will have either an Android app or a progressive web app for iMessage on the Quest?
No, the iMessage is never being ported to any other platform, and I don't see VR changing that.
We'll see. Or FaceTime, for that matter. What about FaceTime?
Well, FaceTime is already a web app. You can already use it on.
So do you think I will be able to load up FaceTime on my Quest?
As long as I'm not misunderstanding something, you could already do that today as of iOS 15.
I'd like to prove that.
Although, obviously, you wouldn't have a webcam. But, yeah, if they add a virtual webcam...
Can my avatar show up in FaceTime?
Well, that would be an Oculus browser feature. If Oculus browser adds virtual webcam via avatar, which seems like a likely feature in the next few years at least, then I don't see any reason why not.
Well, we just hashed out like 1,000 metaverse conversations in the 2 minutes here, because we've just described the exact interoperability that needs to be ironed out for us to have this stupid metaverse that everyone's talking about. Sorry, I called it
Ian, the most important question that we haven't touched on is, will it play Crysis? All that matters, man. Come on. I'll tell you what, there has been some really fantastic conversations occurring in our chat today. I want to thank all of you for having civil discourse, because it really does help, as you can tell, as we invoke some of your comments and have discussions about it. We really do care about how much, your opinions and your statements in here. I also want to say thank you to some of our regulars in here who come in and give us the info that we so desperately need sometimes. Guy, I know you got nothing better to do than to sit in here and chat with us, so I really appreciate that. That's really cool. And Luppy Luptonium, absolutely. Thank you for all of your comments and everything. And yes, Ray's band. That's funny. That's very funny. We have all sorts of fun stuff coming to you, as we do every single day on UploadVR.com. Ian, do we have anything fun and exciting coming up very, very recently?
I'll have to think about that. We've spent a couple weeks here catching up to this news. I think we're caught up a little bit, but it's coming in waves, and we don't know necessarily where the next wave is going to be. We've got a lot of big content coming out through the end of this year, lots of updates. Every Quest developer out there, every PSVR developer for that matter, knows that kind of like Christmas is the time that you need to have your best foot forward. And so there's going to be a lot of developers making sure that their products are priced right, have the best and greatest features, and they're all going to be launching in these next few weeks before Christmas. So there's going to be a lot you need to come back to us for. Thank you.
That's awesome. Heaney, what do you think? Do we I see a comment here. UploadVR engage in VR event. When? Valdarg wants to know, when are they going to be able to come and hang out with us? Should we do an engage event, or should we just invite everybody here to the studio? And with that, Heaney just poof. And the question made his headset explode. Which is
Kyle put him on the spot, and he felt so uncomfortable. He just needed to nope right out of reality.
Ian, would you like to go and spend some time with our dedicated fans and audience and just have some cool chit chat with them in some sort of social experience? Should we set
Yeah,
that
it'd be
up?
pretty amazing. We should really test. Kyle, you've been sort of drumming this, hitting this drum of like, should we have like a room in, I don't know, Horizon or VR Chat or both, and then go in there, mill around, meet people, and then come in, just go from that room to this room, and people will have gotten a chance to talk to us, and then we come in here. It's very much, it would be a pretty nice experience to have that sort of flow.
I feel like even a panel discussion where, avatars, y'all can come and hang out with us in some sort of social experience, and we can just have one-on-one chat and then just stream that. That would be fun. I mean, we could take all of these assets from this studio and, have Heaney just export them out of Unity and drop them into some other thing. We could do that, or we could just show up, come as you are type of thing. I would be excited to do something like that. Engage is a good social experience. We could maybe use it. I don't know. I would do it in Horizon Worlds, but as I have found out, none of us have Horizon invites.
I'd be curious about, we should talk to Heaney about VR Chat and see what are the technical sort of hitches to import this whole space into VR Chat and let people, let this be a VR Chat world.
Yeah. I'm gonna work on getting a new avatar. Last time I was in VR Chat, my avatar was
he's back.
Horrible.
Heaney. We've made all sorts of promises to our viewers.
While you were gone.
You've made what?
We made all sorts of comments about you while you were gone. So if you want to defend yourself,
we've promised to our audience that you can import this world into VR Chat and let everyone visit it.
You promised that. Oh dear.
I didn't. Ian did. Don't blame me.
Oh dear. Oh, I think you can hear the plausibility of that by simply the two words. Oh dear.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Well, we'll. You know what?
Just
I'll put the challenge out there.
Just before you cut off, I think you were talking about Engage. It's a fantastic platform. If people aren't aware of that, ENGAGE. It's a fantastic platform. A lot of institutions are using it for remote VR education. And yeah, I think in the space of social VR, there are very few apps that are doing as interesting work as what Engage has been doing. And people should really check it out if you don't know that. That's just the last thing I heard before my headset crashed into oblivion.
Absolutely.
Was the word Engage.
I want to second, third, fourth, and fifth that Engage is a phenomenal system. Those developers are OGs. They've been around for a while and they know what's going on. And I really am so excited to see how well Engage has done over the years and what they'll continue to do. I think that's a name that you don't want to forget. But no, I want to put the challenge out there to our audience, our fan base. I don't know if you're fans or not. You just come to listen to us garble back and forth. Somebody make us a VR chat room. Somebody make an UploadVR chat room that looks like this studio or whatever it is you want to see us in, and we'll come occupy it one day, and we'll just come do. Would you be willing to do that, Ian?
Yeah, sure. It's just here's Kyle being like a social network trying to co-opt free labor off of the community. I don't know.
You have to want to. I'm not saying you have to. If you want to, we'll come occupy the space. Making me look like a taskmaster. Where's my virtual whip? Go make us a world. Oh boy. All right. Well, with all that being said, final words of wisdom, Ian. Anything?
Read UploadVR.com. We're going to have the latest for you throughout the holiday season. Make sure you tell your friends about us because we're going to have a lot of great recommendations on what people should buy and how they should save their time and money. Yeah. And Heaney?
Nothing to say other than just thanks again for the really great quality of comments in the chat. I appreciate it that we actually get a high quality on topic discussion, which is more than you can say for most YouTube live streams I watch. So every week I'm impressed by the fact that we have genuine input that we can actually use in the show. And that's something we were always hoping for when we started this show. And it's great that we have it.
Absolutely. And I mirror everything that my colleagues here have said. I have to look over here. So my hand tracking, why is my hand there? I'm pointing this way. Anyway, Yes, thank you all. Like, subscribe, share, comment, ring that bell, blah, 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 blah. Thank you all very much for watching. We'll see you in the future. Bye-bye.